Welcome back to the podcast. You're listening to Starting the Conversation. I'm your host, Alice Benham, with this week's guest. It feels weird saying guest. I don't feel like you're a guest. It's just a chat. But
just a
this week's
person.
This week's other voice that you can hear, Ray Dodd. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. I feel like we've crossed paths so many times.
I know. When you kind of landed in my inbox a few weeks ago, about a month ago maybe, I was like, oh, this is nice.
I know.
So I think we chatted on TikTok a bit when you joined.
We did. You welcomed me onto the platform.
And then I know Vix, who I know you know, so I've heard lots of talk about you from Vix as well.
Such a small world,
It is
isn't
a
it?
tiny world.
Everyone knows everyone. It's like that game of you can always get to someone through 5 connections, and I feel like in the business space it's probably like 3.
Yeah.
If not 2.
Oh my God, it would be quite a short game, wouldn't it? I love playing that game. I play that to get myself to sleep sometimes.
Oh, amazing.
Like try and connect really random celebrities.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've got a few key people in my life who are like in good circles, and they're always my first. So it's like if I need to get to Justin Bieber, right, I know someone who's a singer.
I used to try and link really disparate, like really random people, and often be a royal with like Will Smith.
Yes.
But now with Meghan Markle, she's kind of ruined it in a way because I can just go something via Suits, and I'm there.
She is truly bridging the gap. Shout out to Meghan Markle, making change everywhere. Well, not on the topic of Meghan Markle, but on the topic of money, which the listeners will be very excited to have seen, is the topic of today's episode. Always the most downloaded episodes are about money. And I think so much of what you share, definitely myself, if not the listeners as a secondary, I'm almost just here to ask you the questions for my own personal gain, if I'm honest with you. I know we'll find so much value in.
Yeah.
I think an interesting place to begin would be to understand a bit more of your story with money. I'm always fascinated when people end up in jobs that like you wouldn't see your job title on a careers page, right? You're not in school and it's like, oh, do you want to be a money coach that's helping people to it's like that's just not a thing. So I'm curious, I guess, what's your story with money looked like, and how has that led you to do the work that you do today?
So this is so interesting you asked this, because in my welcome sequence in my emails, the second or first email people get is my kind of a chunk of my money story, but like there's so many aspects to it. And it's always the one that, like, I had someone email me once and go, someone told me to sign up to your emails for that email to hear that story. So the story of like, really like, obviously there's lots of aspects. I was just writing an email about this sort of thing before I got here. Like our money, like stories, our beliefs, our feelings about money are informed by so many different aspects. Like I always say, like it's family, it's society, it's the culture you grew up in, it's the school, it's like so much stuff. Beliefs, just general like mythology about money that exists in society. The best place to start, I think, is where I started my business from, which was 2016. And I always say, this is in the email as well, it's the year David Bowie died. And I think it's the year, like, I think David Bowie was holding up the fabric of the universe, because it's also the year Trump got voted in. And it's also the year that Brexit happened, I think. All of that happened. And David Bowie died in January. And then it all, like, we all know what's happened since then. So I like to think that he was holding the fabric of the universe together.
That's incredible.
And it fell apart. And also my personal life fell apart quite dramatically. So my husband had been running a business which I knew wasn't making much money, but I thought was bringing in some. And I remember so vividly, he was on our bed with our kids, and I walked in and he said, we had this hallway of doom, I like to call it, which is loads of stuff that needs eBaying.
Oh,
and
amazing.
It's in our hallway.
Love that. It's like the drawer of tat.
Yeah, exactly.
But a hallway.
At university, we used to call it the tub of love. It was all of our like dishes and stuff in our halls. So we had this hallway full of stuff that needed selling at the time. And he said to me, he went, we should eBay some stuff. And now this man has never suggested anything like that in his life. I was like, what do you mean? Why do you want us to eBay stuff? And he just went, we've got no money. And I was like, what do you mean we've got no money? He's like, we've got £7.50. We had £7.50 left in all our accounts, everything, credit cards, everything. We had nothing. And I had been, and to be fair, I want to be really clear, because part of this is his story, so I have to be really careful how I tell it.
Sure.
But I do have his permission to tell it. He had not done anything terrible. He just wanted to shield me from money worries. So the money had gone on food and living and stuff, but he hadn't told me that he wasn't bringing that money in from that business. And I was running a business at the time. I was a hypnobirthing teacher. So I'd had my kids and I'd gone into, like, as lots of mums do, working in that kind of birth world. And I could make like £300 to £1,000 in a month, but it was very like, I didn't know what it was going to be. So I was like, oh my God, we've got no money. And like, to be really clear, for quite a while, it was calling up family to ask them to deliver some shopping so I could feed my kids. Like, it was really, really bad. We went on benefits. We got other credit cards, all of that stuff. But in that time, I realised that I had been very ambitious for his business. I kept saying to him, what point will you be making that much money? And what will that mean? And when will you do that? And how are you going to do that? All the time. But I was working part-time, but mostly a stay-at-home mum with 2 children under 3, I think I had at the time.
My
Yeah, so one of the
gosh.
kids was, if it's 2000, he was 18 months, I think, when this happened, and the other one was maybe 4, actually, so 2 under 4. And I suddenly clicked and was like, I can't expect him to do this for me. Like, I've been inadvertently looking for him to rescue me or rescue us as a family. And I'm not doing the stuff I could do. So I really upped my game in the birthing business that I was running and managed to get that. I started to employ other teachers and really grew the amount of classes we were doing. And I think I'd actually just invested in it beforehand in my first ever coaching e-course type thing. And I did that, and that started to grow and grow and grow. But I had this idea in my head about coaching mums, and I was like, I just want to, like, I wonder if that would work. And then I got on a call with a coach who I was going to do some work with, and I was like, thing is, we talked about my hypnobirthing business, and I was like, but the thing is, right at the end, and this is what people always do, clients always do this in a call, and I think people do it in therapy as well. It's a really well-known thing.
I think in the doctor world, it's known as the hand on the door question.
Yeah,
because your hand is on the door as you're leaving the room, and you're like, oh, and just one quick thing that's actually going to completely change the trajectory of everything we just talked about.
Therapists say the session's not over until the door's shut.
Yes.
Because as people are putting on their coat, more stuff comes out. So I did that, and I went, there is this other idea, but I know if I look at it, if I pick it up, I'll never be able to put it down, and I won't want to do anything else.
What a sign.
Exactly. But obviously hilarious to me now. But at the time I was like, and that's bad, because I'll leave this business that's working and it's getting better, and I'll be distracted. And I also I know like everybody's being diagnosed with ADHD at the moment. I am not diagnosed, but I have a strong suspicion I've got ADHD. And so I do that thing of the bright shiny thing, lots of ideas. I'm somebody with a very like full head of ideas. So I've got a trail of businesses from like before I had kids that I kind of started but didn't start, or spent money on, didn't do them, from way back.
How many domains do you own?
I'm not a domain buyer.
Are you not? I'm a domain buyer.
Lots of people are domain, but I don't really do that. I don't know why. I own about 4.
Okay.
But like,
it's
not
a humble amount.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a dinner party question where like, if you're not in the business space, like, how many domains have you got? People would be like, that's the weirdest thing.
Yeah.
But I think ask a business owner, easily everyone's got a couple of domains.
But I think it's because I'm very comfortable doing everything under the Ray Dodd kind of thing. So if I was to do like all the ideas, if you ask me how many courses have I run or how many, like, that would be, that's my domains. I'd like to do it through me. This coach said to me, in fact, she was like, well, there's a choice. You can work on your hypnobirthing business, or you can do the coaching thing. And I'm not working on both with you. You have to pick one. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do the coaching thing then. So I tried it, and that evolved over time into the money thing. So I was actually writing this email this morning, was about the first money course I ever ran. And I was so naive. Like, I got people in, was really excited about it. And I just had no idea the level of feeling and the intensity of emotion that I was going to let out in that Facebook group and on those Zoom calls when we did the like live sessions and stuff. I remember just being like, oh my God. And the thing with me with money is I've had to deal with so much around my own. I didn't grow up with money. I was probably not the poorest, but one of the ones with the least money at a private school. My grandparents paid for it. So I remember one of my friends who lived in a mansion with electric gates, like a proper Kardashian. They had like a bar, and they had a pool room, and they had like, it was just unbelievable. Her bedroom, you could fit my whole house in. The footprint of the bottom of my house would fit in her bedroom.
Yeah.
So she came around to my tiny house, which was smaller than my house now. And I remember her looking out the window, and the people across the road had a Porsche. And she was like, why would they live in a house like this but have a car like that? And it was that a lot of the time. Like this kind of like feeling very like I couldn't afford the clothes that they all had, or the holidays they had, or the skincare that I really wanted that their mums all had. I absolutely loved going in their mums' bathrooms with all the amazing skincare.
I will have a little bit of that.
Yeah, look at this, Clarence, nobody will know. Like, as we all do, just so much money stuff. Certainly didn't think I was somebody that could successfully run a business, to be honest, after my previous attempts. And definitely not somebody who could earn quote unquote a lot of money, whatever that looks like. And so as I kind of went through that stuff and I shared it with my audience, and then I started to get more and more into it, that's when I decided to, after a lot of resistance, to become a money coach. There was a lot of resistance about becoming a money coach. Because like you said, it's not something you see. And also the ones that I had seen were very like blow dried and kind of like a lot of caftans. And I love a caftan, don't get me wrong. But it's not like, I'm also somebody who will spill dinner down myself. Yeah. And as we discussed sitting here, my feet don't touch the floor. So I'm sitting with my legs crossed. Like I don't feel, I didn't feel at the time I was put together enough.
Sure.
To be that sort of coach.
And if the coach is showing up like that, inadvertently the audience, some of the audience I should say, will likely feel that they can't relate to what that coach is sharing because they cannot relate to the person.
And so very quickly I realized what a strength that was, because it's not just for, you know, certain types of people, and I won't be the right type of person for everybody to talk about money. I won't have the right words, the way I dress might not be quite right, or whatever it is, the topics that I focus on. But for some people, if I don't do what I'm doing, there's nobody out there really talking about it in the way that I am. And it surprises me that there's still, like I've been doing this, I think it's about 7 years now. Does that work? No, 6 years. And there's still not really anybody talking about it in the way that I do. There are a few more, but I thought it would be like, everyone would be on it by now, like putting it in context of society and all of that stuff, but it's still quite rare.
Completely. And I think it's so interesting because you can't avoid money in business.
No.
You know, I think any kind of business, but particularly the business that 99% of the listeners of this podcast will be listening to, where they run their business to make profit, to live a good life, alongside all the other things that they want to do at their businesses. That's great. You can't avoid experiencing the effects of your relationship with money when you run a business. But what I find fascinating, and I noticed this very early on in my business, is that nobody explains that to you.
No.
Nobody prepares you for it. Like, it's only in hindsight, really, that I can see, all of those weird feelings and decisions that I made about money in my first 2 years of business, those weren't things that were just like happening to everyone. Actually, that was because of something that was within me.
Yeah.
What do you notice around why we all have such, and maybe why we all is a sweeping statement, why so many of us have such wonky relationships with money?
So I think it's enormous, for starters. It's really, really layered. It's why it's one of the red flags for me, and this happens occasionally. Someone will like slide into my DMs and be like, I've actually done all my money work, but I'm still finding I'm not making the money I want to. And I'm like, have you?
Have you just read what you just wrote to me?
Just read that back out loud, because I haven't done all my money work, and I do it all day, every day. And I don't see money work as being like a tick box exercise that you complete, because the whole of society is telling us stories that are based in what coaches often describe as scarcity or lack, that there is not enough. And depending on who you are and how you present in the world, that is going to be more or less. But for some people, that's going to be really intense. And for some people, it's just going to be intense. But I don't think it doesn't exist for anyone. And I think particularly for women, it shows up. Like, for example, I don't know if everybody will relate to this, because like, I don't know what the like average age of your listener is. I hope it gets better as people are getting younger. But like, I'm an elder millennial. Like I'm just scraping in.
Okay.
So I'm kind of a bit
snuck in the club.
Snuck in. I think I'm literally the year. I know when I was growing up, I didn't really like other women. Like, there was such a story around women are like not funny, and they're not nice, and they're bitchy, and they're this and they're that. And I was like, but I'm funny and I'm nice, and I'm, you know, clever, and I'm all these things I was really wedding my identity to as a teenager. And I didn't see that in other women. I thought I was the only one. And I think a lot of people do experience this kind of competition that we're conditioned to have with one another. Like, you know, in a business sense, it's like when people say, oh, I can't start that business because so-and-so's doing it. But at the same time, they'd be the same person who would be like, oh, I can't do that because nobody's doing it. Like, and you have this kind of idea there's only so much space for people. And I think that in itself is deeply rooted in scarcity. This idea that there's not enough space for women, because unless we are more and more and more like men, and particularly in the business space, in the online business space, it ends up being that kind of bro-markety vibe, which I don't know. Maybe I'm just not in that corner of the world. I don't see that as much as I used to.
I think it's dying out.
I think
people are just seeing it for what it is.
Yeah.
But also probably our algorithms are so aware we hate it that maybe
exactly. Someone else is going like, oh, that's all I see.
Yeah, completely.
But yeah, so it's this kind of like, it's this idea that there just isn't enough for us. And I think everybody gets that message. It's what all systems of oppression are kind of, that's the soil they're grown in. But equally, some people experience it far more acutely. And I would say women and lots of other kind of like people that intersect with that, with being a woman, experience that much more acutely. So yeah, and that spills into everything.
And what I find so interesting, I guess, alongside what society tells us, is also about, you know, how our upbringing and what we experience growing up affects us too, is that two people can have the exact same experience respond in completely different ways.
Yes.
I remember that was a big realization for me, you know, not even a long time ago, probably just in the last few years, of having more open conversations with my friends and realizing, like, our relationships with money are wildly different. Yeah. Yours isn't right, mine isn't wrong.
Yeah.
Or, you know, it's not helped you or not helped me or whatever, but actually, oh, you've just kind of been taught without realizing it. I guess it's a very subconscious set of beliefs, totally, isn't it? To act in that certain way. So I guess a lot of the work that you're doing is helping people to make more conscious beliefs.
Yes.
Instead of the ones that are just ingrained in us because of society, our upbringing, and all of
it's like you get to choose how you relate to money. Like you get to mold and create that relationship, because even though we talk about money as if it's a person, it's not a person. Like money is an object. It's at the most, it's an idea. And we have seen this. Obviously, we are recording this just after the mini budget fiasco of that's been going on in politics. And like a lot of that is people lost confidence in the pound. They lost confidence in the government to be able to steer the UK economy. And so our money starts literally being worthless. Money has, yes, it's an object and we can actually hold it in our hands, but also it's an idea and it's a feeling that we have around it. But if money as an object was a certain way, we wouldn't be able to feel like joyful, scared, excited. It couldn't hold the grief it holds. Like when people inherit money, there can be a lot of grief in money. Like there's so many different feelings we can put on money, but it's about the feelings, not the money itself. And I think it's really interesting what you say as well about different people having these different approaches, because I work with people who've grown up with no money, and I've worked with people who've grown up with lots of money, and often the issues are similar. It's not about, like, I think people often think, oh, well, if you grew up with money, you'll be fine. No, absolutely not. Like there's so many layered feelings that can come alongside that as well. Similarly, when people don't have money growing up, there can be loads of feelings. Both can have less feelings. Like it's completely individual.
You were talking there about kind of doing the work when it comes to money, and like you said, that's not a destination. It's not, I've done all my work and I'm finished. It's an ongoing thing. Why is it important that we do the work? Because from my perspective, the work can feel uncomfortable, can feel difficult, can feel a bit painful. Actually, staying where I am with my slightly wonky subconscious beliefs feels quite comfortable. So why make that change?
Well, I think it's also being really honest. Like, if you're having peaks and troughs in your earnings, is that really comfortable? Or is it just, the discomfort and so it feels safer?
It's familiar discomfort.
It's familiar hideousness. Like for most of us, if you were in a situation where month in, month out, you were totally happy with the money you were making, then great. I would suggest, and I have personal experience of this, you don't want to get like slack on actually doing the work, because you might find that the stuff actually creeps in and you haven't noticed. But because everything around us leading with this real scarcity narrative, but also this very like, you have to be a certain person to make money.
Yes.
So, and that looks like loads of things. That looks like you have to be professional in a certain way. You have to be, you have to dress a certain way. You have to speak a certain way. Your business has to look a certain way. Like a little while ago, there was a whole push about the only way to make money is if you've just got one product. It has to be one product. Don't know if you saw that.
No.
Everywhere I looked, it was like one product's the way, one product's the way. Often, and I say this all the time because it really winds me up, often that narrative was being pushed by people who had one product made up of all their other products that they'd got to their one product by. Like they'd figured out what their one product was, and it would be a membership with like 7 mini courses for when they had multiple products. And so there's often this thing of like, either you've got to have loads of products, you've got to have this specific customer journey, you've got to have, whatever it is. So there's all these really narrow boxes we're being asked to put ourselves into, and often they don't actually suit us. And so and I would say if you're making money month in, month out and you're fine, then maybe it is all right. Maybe you don't need to worry about it. I'd still say be checking in with yourself. But most people are finding it's a much more of a roller coaster. And take into account, we had COVID, then we've had cost of living, the war in Ukraine, we've had this mini budget, we've had all these different things which most business owners, most like freelancers and self-employed people are like, oh my God, well, what's that going to mean? And so to like keep yourself emotionally steady in the midst of that around money specifically is not easy. And so it's really about untangling. I always describe it as like, if you imagine yourself, like, it's like who you are and how you personally are meant to relate to money and your business and all that stuff, because money is really just a symptom of how your business is going. It's not actually the be all and end all, even though I'm a money coach. It's not the thing that I don't want everyone just focusing on making loads of money. I want people focusing on making the kind of money that allows them to live the life they want and have the impact they want.
Yeah,
that's
and
what
making
matters.
it in a way that feels good.
Exactly.
And I've made a lot of money before that's wildly unsustainable.
Exactly.
Wouldn't make it again.
Exactly. So yeah, it's like you want to make it like work out who you are underneath all these layers of who you should be and who you have to be and who you're allowed to be, and all those different things that get put on us that mean we end up doing things that don't actually fit who we actually are, like our energy levels or our personality or just what brings us joy, all of those things. Like, you really want to be making money in that space, and it often takes a while to uncover who you are in that space and then create the business around it.
Something I love that you talk about is that we can't control perhaps why we feel the way we do about money, yet we are responsible for our future relationship with money.
So I say it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yes.
That's my like catchphrase. They'll have it on my tombstone. I say it so much.
Ray Dodd. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Do your kids hear that line all the time?
No, I'm quite good at that. I don't think they even know what I do.
Because I feel like I could apply that to most things in life.
Oh yeah, no, I
like
should bring it out to them. Yeah, I should be saying it more to them, definitely.
I love it. But I think, all jokes aside, that's a great way of looking at it, because, I imagine for a lot of people listening, where they begin to reflect on their experiences with money and they think, oh gosh, I'm feeling a bit like a victim. Oh God, all these things have happened to me.
Yeah.
Actually looking at it as like, same with a lot of things in life. We can't change that it's happened, but right, what can we do to help ourselves move forwards? This is a very big question that I know is not going to have a one-size-fits-all answer, but something that I love about the way you talk about money is it feels like there's this very strong belief within you that we all can and deserve to make a lot of money.
Yes.
Full stop.
Absolutely.
No caveats, no disclaimers.
Yes.
We all deserve to make tons of money.
Yeah.
How do we make lots of money in our businesses? What does that look like in terms of action?
So I think it looks like uncovering who you actually are. So it looks like looking at where you are forcing yourself into spaces that don't fit you. The online world can be so noisy with all of these, like, I did a reel about this the other day because I saw this tip and then I got myself completely in knots about following this tip for a week. And the tip was do less content, but better quality. I know that works for people and that's amazing. That is not how my brain works. My brain is firing on all cylinders with all sorts of different ideas. I need to get the crap out and eventually the good will come with it.
Yeah.
That's how. So I'm much more of a like, let me just put it all out.
Yes.
And I know that some of it's going to land and some of it won't. And that's
a great
fine.
mindset. I love that. Throw it at the wall.
Yeah, exactly. Because when I do it's got to be the best, I just go, what's the best? What does the best look like? I don't know. And I don't get anything done. Whereas I almost need to sneak it past my brain and then my best will come out and I'll be like, wow, people loved that post. I did not expect that. But so I'll get that quality. But it's interesting how I couldn't do content for a few days because I was like, well, I should be doing more. And that's not how I work. And that's just a small example of so many different ways we can end up doing business in ways that just don't suit who we are. So I work with lots of people with chronic health conditions, for example, and they're often feeling like, how can I make my business so that I'm able to be available all the time, so that I'm able to show up in this way? And the answer is, with their energy levels, with the situation they're in, they can't. So they need to build a business that allows them to do what their body needs, because if they try and do what somebody without that chronic health situations doing, they're going to burn themselves out and not be in their business in the first place at all. So in order to create sustainable, like you mentioned about sustainable income earlier, sustainable income, we need it to reflect who we are, what our quirks and weirdnesses are, what our joys are. Like in one of my programs, we do a joy audit, because the idea is like, what do you love doing? Like I could talk on a podcast days and just be so happy. And so how can I get more of that into my business? How can I make money from that? One of my friends said when I started my business, she went, it's really weird, Ray. It's like you've monetized being yourself.
That
at
is
a dinner
a beautiful
party.
phrase.
Isn't it amazing?
I love that.
Yeah, if you sit down in a dinner party next to me, I'm probably going to encourage you to make money, and that, or dress like you want to dress, or like I would have been coaching you before I knew what a coach was, because that's who I am and how I do things. And so, so a lot of it is about, and like you said, it is a huge question. And I run like 6-month plus courses on doing this, but it is a lot about like, what is you sized? What is you showing up as you in your business, which then allows you to like that, the money to flow, because there's not as much resistance in terms of like, oh God, I know I've got to show up like that. I know I've got to try and be that way, but it's just so like, because sometimes it can be so hard.
This is an odd analogy to use to possibly reflect back what you're saying there, but I had a realization recently that for the last 7 years I've been trying to make myself a runner when I'm not a runner.
Yes.
So I like really value at the moment the way I'm looking after myself. I'm so prone to burnout that it's like very, very necessary just to look at those personal habits. And I was like, right, September rolls around, let's get back into running and keep going. And I just realized halfway through a run, I was like, I hate running. Like, what actually matters to me is being my version of healthy and fit and moving my body. And I have struggled to do that for years because I've always thought, well, the only way to do that is by running.
Yeah.
And then I went to a class recently and I did some spinning and I did some HIIT and I was like, this is what I like to do. And I'm reaching the same goal, completely different way of getting there, but a way that actually feels good for me.
What I would do is break it down even more. So what do you love about that? What is it in the classes that you love? Like, what's happening there? Like, is it the connecting with people? Is it the having a teacher? Is it the, like, whatever it is?
Yeah.
And you can often get so much, like, gold in that to keep expanding on that kind of space so that you can trust that you, and obviously we're moving it then into business.
Yes.
But you're far more likely to sustain that kind of exercise, right? Like, to keep showing up. And that's the thing. So many of us are struggling so much, and we can look at it in content. Like, oh, my content, I just don't want to write another post. Well, do you love video? Can you talk about something you love doing in amongst all of this stuff? Like, are you trying to use words that aren't you? Like, that's a real, if people have been in the corporate world or just absorbed stuff generally, the amount of people whose website you land on and you're like, who is this?
Is this a LinkedIn page?
Yeah,
it feels very stale.
Exactly.
No, completely.
Like, when we do that, we put ourselves in a position of competing on price. Because we're just like, these are the bare bones of my business. Like, I'm a photographer and these are my photos and that's it. Whereas if you actually get a sense of who that person is, and not just through their photos, also through their website, through their content, like, you're getting a sense of that person, then you start being like, I want to hire that person. That's who I want. And the price becomes less of an issue. And then we make more money because we can price in a way that feels good to us as well.
That feels like such a permission slip. And I hope, in the same way that I'm feeling like right now, so many listeners will be like, that's probably a big part of what's feeling difficult in my business right now. You know, we are bombarded with information, and, you know, we are people sat here today giving out a lot of information.
Have some more.
I'm not bashing the information giving, but it is so important, just thinking as you're saying there, that every time we consume it, it goes through a filter of not just, oh, that person's telling me to do this, so great, I'm going to blindly go and do it. But actually, does that align with A, what my vision is, B, the way I want to run my business, you know, what feels good to me, like you're saying there. Obviously, a big part of making a lot of money is pricing. And you mentioned that yourself.
Yes.
Pricing is easily the biggest topic that people ask about.
It really is,
on this podcast. And I tend to talk about pricing a lot from the perspective that I feel equipped and comfortable in, which is from quite a logical standpoint of thinking about, you know, what's the theory behind your pricing. And I do believe, I think when you know some of the numbers behind it, it feels a bit easier to own that price point. You don't just feel like you've plucked it out of thin air. There are so many feelings attached to prices, right? Which I guess is partly where I like the logical bit, because it feels like it takes the feeling away from me, where I'm like, the price is nothing to do with me. But when your business is yourself, like you said, you monetize being you, it's hard not to feel like that price is very attached to us as humans, our self-worth, etc., etc. How do we price in a way that is good, i.e. it makes us a lot of money, without feeling super icky about it and halving it the minute that we actually go and send it to someone?
So am I allowed to promote a freebie on here?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I actually have this flowchart, which is called the Pricing with Feelings Guide, I think. And it basically does the thing. So I agree with you. Maths is really important. And that sounds really obvious, but people forget.
They do.
It's like, do the maths. Look at your overheads. What do you want to earn? Because of the sort of business, I should be really clear. The sort of business I run is not a product-based business where I've got specific overheads. I've got like a team and stuff like that. So I tend to price in more of a like how it feels to me, knowing what I need to make for the month. So I would look at, so for coaches, for example, or service-based business, you might look at like, okay, I could sign this many people at that price. That would lead me to make this much a month. That's kind of how I like to do it.
Completely.
But often you land on the price and people go, huh, oh my God. Either, or they go, oh, that's not very much, even though they've done the maths and that's the number, but it feels disappointing. Or it feels, and I talk about underpricing or overstretching. With pricing, I don't really talk about overpricing. I think you can overstretch with your pricing. And that means that your price is stretching beyond what your self-concept, which is a super coachy word, which just means like your ideas about yourself and your nervous system can hold. And that's when you get the situation that you're talking about, where maybe you're on a Zoom call with a potential client, you get to the price bit and you say the price and like straight away look down and look really like, oh my God, I can't believe we're talking about this. Or you drop it. And that's what happens a lot. Or even you email and say, this is the price. Let me know if you've got any problems. If that's an issue, we can sort something out. And you're already saying, oh my God, this is too much, isn't it?
I feel so seen. Because it is. I mean, I even notice as you're saying that, I always round the price down.
Yeah.
Like I do a lot of package work with startups at the moment, and I'll figure out my hourly rate and then I'll always just knock a few hundred off. Right. And I'm like, why? Like, what is that? But that is, it's like almost like that hand on the door moment, isn't it? Like you're saying of people in calls, that hand on the door moment with pricing where it's like so confident up into a point and then it's like, okay, quickly, let's slash it.
I can't hold it. And that's your self-concept and your nervous system not quite being able to hold that price. And so I absolutely, so in the Pricing with Feelings guide, I say like, do the math. And I always say there's loads of people with amazing formulas that I haven't got that can give you the maths end of this. But what the Pricing with Feeling guide does is it goes, right, now how does that price feel? Like what's the next? So check in with yourself. Does it feel icky? Icky is the word with pricing. People are always like, oh, it just feels icky. It feels like I feel like I'm going to be sick. Like even saying the price out loud. And so we need to check in with that. And what beliefs are leading you to think that? So it might be, it's just too much for them. I know it's too much. So we're getting in our clients' pockets and deciding with a no knowledge of their income, other than maybe snippets, what they can and can't afford. Often, and this is slightly uncomfortable, but for women listening, particularly women who work with women, I often talk about the fact that what we're often doing is policing how other women spend their money, which is really uncomfortable because that's a big old like misogynistic nastiness that we've all been subjected to in various ways. Bear in mind, like women weren't allowed bank accounts and stuff till quite recently. So, you know, when we're doing that, we're saying like, and this happened with the cost of living crisis, it happened with Ukraine, it happened with COVID, where people go, people shouldn't be spending their money. Why are you selling? Why I shouldn't be selling? This is not what people should be spending their money on. We're deciding for them what they spend without trusting them.
Yeah. You're basically saying you don't have the ability to make a decision.
Yes.
So I'm going to decide for all of you that none of you want to buy.
That none of you can afford this, that it's going to put you in financial dire straits.
So many assumptions.
It's so many assumptions, and it's so problematic when we don't trust people. Like if we talk about, without going into this loads, but like I'm very into the idea of dismantling various systems, patriarchal systems, white supremacist systems, all of that stuff. If we really want to dismantle that stuff, we have to notice where we're accidentally, and this is very much a not your fault situation, where we're accidentally propping them up, where we are perpetuating this idea that people can't be trusted to make their own money decisions. And I always tell the story of two clients when I started. I think I was probably in the first year of me coaching, two clients, one of whom I knew and one of whom done a course of mine. They wanted to book onto a group coaching program, which I think was about £1,500 for 3-4 months of coaching. And I knew they were both on benefits. And I was like, I absolutely should not take that call. That's not an ethical thing to do. They shouldn't be spending their money on that, like making all these decisions. And I'd done enough of my own money work with other coaches at the time to be like, okay, I shouldn't make that decision for them. I'll do the call and I'll be really careful with which I always am. I never ask people to make a decision on the call. But it got to the end and I always say the price and then I say, how does that feel? Or if they know the price, I'll be like, how do you feel about the price and the money stuff? And they both signed up on the call. Neither of them are on benefits anymore. They both one of them runs a 6-figure business. One of them runs like a really like successful apparel business, I guess. But a lot of her stuff is like low end, but they both support their families. Now, I'm not saying I got them there. They might have done another course, but I definitely would have got in their way if I decided how they should spend their money and how they manage their money, which I had no idea about. I don't even know how they paid for it. Maybe they asked family members, but whatever they did, it had a really positive effect for them.
And as long as you create, you know, obviously here we're talking about service-based businesses, but with however you sell, as long as you make a selling process that is consensual and ethical and gives people all the information in the space that they need to make their own decision, it's not on you then to make any of that decision.
And it's so interesting, we talk about ethical selling, which I'm really pro. I would say like ethical is very like a nebulous term, but equally I'm really pro that in spirit. But that's allowing people to make their own decisions, and yet we often label pricing our stuff lower and not like as if that's more ethical.
So true. Or just not marketing ourselves at all. I mean, I feel like you can relate it to marketing as well. I see it a lot. Like I always a peak in people that message me around big life events, you know, the Ukraine war, even the Queen's death. You know, a lot of messages off of clients like, oh, should I stop this or check? And I was like, you know, let's think about it. I moved a launch because of it. But that was because the launch was due to be on the day of a funeral and people weren't going to be on Instagram. I was going to say,
it's where their eyes are, isn't it? Yeah.
But it wasn't from a place of, oh gosh, there's something going on in the world, there's uncertainty, so I'm going to now hold back. And actually a perspective, I don't know who I first saw it from, but I feel like a lot of people share the same message that really resonated with me, was sharing that actually if you're holding back selling something, you are stopping people from having the impact of what you do. You know, if you truly believe and feel connected to the impact that your work can have, you're doing people a disservice by not selling it to them.
Especially when we think about something like a recession that is probably coming up. They seem to be trying to desperately make that happen. So if there's a recession, one of the things I've done whenever there's been so many big bumps in the road over the last 5-6 years, is invest in support so that I can get my business through that, because I know I'm going to have more feelings coming up. I know I'm going to have lots of questions. I know the market's going to be changing. Again, this is more of a service based, but I think you can apply it to product based businesses as well, because I think product based businesses can really underestimate the impact they have. But for service based businesses, like say you're a business coach or you are run a social media company or all sorts of things, you could be part of what gets that person through that recession. You could be part of, you know, the fact even that they just invested in you could be part of why they stick at it and they think in certain ways and they stay on their feet with it. The idea that we should remove it from people because we just boil it down to they shouldn't be spending their money right now. It's not our decision to make.
There's obviously so much work for us all to do around that, because from what you're saying, it feels like a lot of it comes back to worrying about how people see us and being very conscious of, oh God, you know, they're going to judge me because of the price. They're going to judge me because I'm selling. So obviously that's a whole nother conversation. And what I'd imagine a lot of doing the work is picking those things. I feel like a big thing that comes up when we talk about pricing and money mindset is affordability. And I almost see it as this bit of a like, right, Ray, you've like done a really good serve, you've given us a really good point, and then people try to hit back this word of affordability. We're like, well, bam, that's why you're wrong, because I want to be affordable and I want to be accessible. How do we price in a way that is affordable, because we are wanting to be considerate to our communities and also just sell something that people can buy, because if they can't buy it, they're not going to buy it, yet still make sure it works for us?
So there's a few aspects to it. So the first thing is, I don't think affordability exists.
Interesting.
Because it's kind of a bit of an unacknowledged privilege piece. If you're selling something for £1, some people can't afford it. And for some people, if you're charging £50,000, it's not expensive enough for them to value it. So a lot of it is about getting really clear on who your people are. I can't remember who I heard say this either, but someone said like, speak exclusively to your ideal client and ignore everybody else. And I think that's really important. Like, just who are your people? What are they? So we can take, you know, all that's going on in the world and be like, how are your people feeling in this moment? Because some of them want to buy things that are going to make them feel better because it all feels really rubbish. And some of them are going to want to, like I just said, invest in business support because that really matters right now. Or they're going to want to free up some of their time and get a service-based business in to take off some stuff so that they can focus on navigating it. Like, what are your clients doing? And focus your pricing around them. And also, and I've got a whole podcast episode on this in my podcast because it's long, like, to go into it. But when we talk about affordability, I think we're often thinking about what we could afford, and we're also shrinking what's possible for people. We're deciding beforehand, like we just said, what they can and can't afford, and we're not making space for what they might be aspiring to afford. I don't know if you've done this, but I've invested in particularly coaching programs multiple times when I didn't know how I was going to make the money every single month. And part of investing has allowed me to make more money. Now, I'm not suggesting that's always a good idea, by the way, because you need to check in with that self-concept and nervous system thing. If it puts you in a panic, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not good. But if it's like feels exciting and like, well, I've got a plan. Like if I sold these things, if I did this, then that would happen. Why don't I believe that can happen in order for me to make that extra amount of money? And so there is an element as well when we're just focused on affordability. It's very like contracting kind of energy to it. It's very like, oh, what could they maybe afford, rather than like, what would they like to spend? Because I know that lots of people are struggling at the moment. I'm not pretending they aren't, but a lot of people aren't as well. And if your clients are in that space, then it's okay to sell at prices that really support what you need as well. And what's going to allow you to show up and do your best work. Because we've all priced things at points and then been resentful. And like I always say, it's so funny, like being like, oh, why are they only paying that about the price that you set?
That was you.
Yeah, like hurting your own feelings with your pricing. And we've all done that. Like, again, it's not a judgment at all. I've definitely done that and been like, oh my God, this is way too much for what I've decided to charge for it.
I have such a toxic relationship with my past self. Like the things that she does, that now I'm like, you are absolute dickhead. Do not like you anymore. Something that's just coming to mind as you're saying that is even just reflecting on how we see other people charging must have a really direct link to how we view ourselves. I had a really interesting conversation with a client, it was a good few years ago, and they were telling me, oh, I'm really worried that people are going to judge that this is too much and I'm pricing too much. And I thought I was being really good asking this next question. I was like, well, you surely don't judge other people that charge a lot. And she was like, no, I do.
Yeah.
She's like, I really do.
Yeah.
And I'm even just thinking of that now, and I'm like, well, yeah, I look, you know, in the worlds that we're in of people doing one-to-one support, I look at people that charge over £10,000 for a package, and I always look at that and just go, first of all, love that for you, but also like, oh, it's a bit much, isn't it? Yeah. But then I realised, well, yeah, if I'm looking at other people's pricing like that, of course I'm then going to have some weird feelings about mine. Yeah. Because you're just assuming that people are looking at you the way you're looking at others. And
that was the switch for me, and this was quite recent with this expansive versus expensive. So like when I'm saying, and again, my audience are primarily women. So what am I saying? Women like them can't afford certain amounts. Like how am I shrinking what's possible for them when I shrink what's possible for me?
Yes.
And what am I, when I say like, yeah, you can totally make this much money on repeat. Of course you can invest that and then some. I'm actually creating a space for them to step into with that. And I have no issue, and I know some coaches do. If you find a coach that has this issue, run. It's such a flipping red flag. But I have no issue with my clients out earning me. Like, amazing. Like, go for it.
Yeah.
Go, like, you know, that investment could be the spark. And obviously then the work we do together, it's not like I'm like, well, you invested, so that's all the work we need to do now. But, you know, that investment could be part of what kind of expands that self-concept. Suddenly, I was talking to my assistant about this, and I don't know if anyone else, well, no, I think some people will totally relate to this, but like, if I buy an expensive lipstick, it changes who I think I am. You know, that kind of feeling of like, well, I'm putting this, it's just lipstick, it's not changed anything, or a nice bag, or certain outfits. They can really change how you feel about yourself and who, like, same with your surrounding. It's why I think actually so many product-based businesses really do themselves a disservice when they don't consider the impact they have, because for me, like, surroundings have such an impact on so much of what we do. The sort of pen you hold, even like the diary you're writing in, can change who you believe you are
massively.
And so similarly, with an investment like that, it can absolutely be expansive and like, oh, I get to step into this space, and suddenly we're showing up on our social media differently. We're putting out products that we didn't believe, you know, we could. Like, we weren't that sort of person, because we become that sort of person. And I want to be really clear, the investment is one aspect of that. I'm not saying that's, you know, I feel like some coaches are like, just invest and your life will completely change.
No, that always I'm like, wait, so I'm just giving you 20 grand. It's almost as like a bank account, like I'm just the money transfer is the work.
Yeah, that's it. But, so I'm
like,
not saying that.
Give 20 grand to my dad and then give it back to me in 2 years' time. Like,
but
feels better.
Equally, I do think there is something in that of like who you become when you commit to something like that. And so, yeah, I think when it comes to the pricing thing, it's also asking yourself, like, what is that going to mean for my clients? You know, what's the difference between when you buy, I don't know, I'm trying to think, like things in your house even, like the first time you buy something that's not IKEA.
The one that came to mind was like an IKEA candle versus like when you go to Home Sense.
Exactly.
And you buy like...
Yeah. Or even like a beauty pie candle versus like an actual diptyque candle. Like, they smell quite similarly. They're actually made by a lot of the same people, but there's a difference in kind of like how it feels.
Yes.
And I think it's just remembering that as well. Like, what transformation and what experience do you want for your clients and customers? Because the price is a part of that. It's not it, but it's a part of it.
Massively.
As well.
So if people are sat listening to this, and obviously we're heading into a time of what's likely going to be a bit of uncertainty, the old R word, recession.
How unusual
coming up again.
for current times.
God, I really feel for business owners that started up like at the start of COVID, because I feel like I at least got a few years of just a clean run.
Yeah.
You know, I
although
think
do you think it's like they'll be amazing once it's all done?
Yeah.
They'll be like, this is a piece of piss.
I know, they're going to be so resilient. Like, if you can survive these years, you're going to be absolutely fine. But, you know, as we are heading into this time, I think a lot of business owners will be thinking, God, should I cut my pricing? And I think based on what you just shared, we're all thinking, no, I'm not going to cut my pricing.
Yeah.
But like, what can we do? If we are thinking, well, I want to make sure that I'm still, accessible / affordable, but you know, I'm using that in the right way. If there is a right way to use that, who knows? It's a longer conversation, part 2. What should we be doing with our pricing or our finances to prepare ourselves for this coming season?
I would actually say, digging into something we said earlier, like you don't want to be competing on price. That's always true. It's especially true now. So you want to be competing on and you can't compete on this because only you are you and only you are what you do. But it's like being really clear on why, like, who are you, what makes you unique, and getting really, really bold in what I often talk about as attracting and repelling. So you want to attract the perfect clients, but with every single thing you do that attracts them, you're going to repel the not ideal clients.
Yeah.
And so you want to do both of those things at once and be as you in it as you can, so that it is this clear offering of not, oh, I'm going to buy that because they're the most accessible or the most affordable. I'm going to buy that. And this, even if you're selling like similar things to other people, because that's true in the service-based industry as well. I think sometimes people feel like it's easier to make it individualized, but I think with products, like, I want to see who I'm buying from.
Yeah.
And that doesn't just mean faces. It's more in like, but it can do. And if you're comfortable with that, that's the easiest way to do it. Like, tell stories, get people involved in what you do and who you are, and like your weird little quirks and stuff as well. Like the things I do, like, honestly, and I'm embarrassed. I embarrass myself regularly just doing like workshops and stuff. Like, I'll be talking about my fringe, or I started banging on in the workshop I did the other week about how I get confused putting on cardigans, and that's why I wear dresses. And as I was saying, I was like, why does anyone care? But those are the sorts of things people often, you know, that's the sort of nonsense you say to friends. And it's part of how you become friends, is that, like, my friendship group, we all became friends in mum and baby groups, my friendship group in where I live. And we did that because we didn't fit in with anybody else there. And so we all sort of found each other as these, turns out it's ADHD, by the way, like all of us have got ADHD.
You're texting each other now, like, are you seeing these
like,
TikToks as well?
Yeah, exactly. What's your algorithm telling you you've got? So, but yeah, we bonded over the fact that we didn't fit in. And that's something that, you know, is true in my audience. A lot of them don't feel like they fit into certain elements of what they've been told about money, or in certain aspects of the coaching world that just doesn't quite fit who they are. So I would say, like, really practically look at like getting your ducks in a row. Like, where are you not doing really obvious things? Like, certainly at the beginning of this year, we realized that we weren't adding people to my newsletter. Like, and we just sort of forgotten to do it. So we've been sorting that out this year. But there might be things like that you can be like, where can you be more consistent with some stuff? Kind of hate that word, but, you know, more persistent with some stuff. Like, what can you be doing, and how can you be honing in on who you actually are and sharing that with people? Because that's what's really irresistible for people. It's not the price. The price is, like you said, the price is the price. It just is. That's why with affordable, I'm like, it's not. It shouldn't really be a consideration if it's affordable or not, because affordable to who? It's more like, does this feel good to me? Can I hold it in my body? Does it give me the money I want? Is it covering my expenses? Then that's the price. And then you speak to those people who can afford it.
And something I think maybe to end on that I saw you sharing on Instagram that I really resonated with was this idea of building a business that is generous to us and generous to others. Yes. I thought that's such a beautiful way of looking at it, where it's not selfish. It's not all about you, but it's also not all about them. I think the conversation can easily go too far one of those ways.
Absolutely.
Actually, it's, how do I build something? How do I price it? How do I sell it? How do I deliver it? that's generous to me, generous to them. That's a beautiful way of doing business.
And I think if generosity matters to you, you can really trust yourself with that. Like if you are someone who's sat there going, oh my God, she's just taken affordability away, I feel terrible now. Like, what am I going to do? You can really trust that you are a generous, kind-hearted, empathetic human being.
Yeah.
And you can trust that a lot of conditioning has got in there to probably make you more concerned about others than yourself, which is very, very normal. That's what I call kindness at all costs, which is this idea that we've got to be kind, and that's what matters most. So when a war kicks off, everyone goes, well, never mind the fact that I need to eat. It's terrible to sell. I won't sell anything. And it's like, well, can you afford to do that? Because a lot of people can't.
And also, we're then ignoring the fact that we might make things worse by us stopping. That's what I always find crazy. It's like both of us have team members, right? People who we helped pay their bills by us running our businesses. Yeah. I am doing them a disservice if I go, oh, guys, because there's uncertainty, I'm going to stop selling. Yeah. Well, that doesn't actually help anyone because if anything, it's negatively impacting my team. If not, then all the other people that I could have worked with.
Also, there's always a war on. There's been a war on.
True.
For ages, forever, somewhere. It's just we pick what is in the news and what matters to us and start to make meaning out of that. But if you're not going to sell whenever there's a war on, then you stop now and you never start again.
So
because
true.
it would be lovely if we were going to have a world without wars, but I don't think that's going to happen for quite some time. Nope. So it's also just that kind of like looking at like, hang on, what's happening here? And it's actually, it's really tricky because we feel like we're doing a nice thing for people, but in reality, we're protecting ourselves from feeling like we're doing the wrong thing. And we need to like look at, like you said, what's actually kind, showing up for our clients and customers and making sure that we and our team are paid.
Yes.
That's actually kind. And that's why I say, like, if it's not generous to you, it's actually not generous to the other people.
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. I've genuinely found this conversation fascinating.
Oh, good.
I really enjoyed it. And I love your approach with, like you were saying earlier, almost like start with the numbers, start with the theory, but then it's right, and how does this feel? Yeah. So I'll link in the show notes that freebie you talked about, the podcast episode you mentioned. Yes. I mean, you put so much. I love that approach, by the way. I've just put loads of content out to see what sticks because it's very generous to all of us.
Exactly.
So I'll leave all of your links in the show notes. You've got an amazing podcast that people can basically just hear more of this.
Yes. Yep. Lots of this.
On and on. So yeah, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely.